Alright guys, we are here in the Like-Minded Creators compound, and today we're going to be taking a look at this guy right here. This is the SSL The Bus Plus bus compressor. And to go over what this neat piece of gear does, I got my main guy Zachy right here.
How's it going?
Producer, engineer, musician extraordinaire. And Zachy is going to go over what this piece of gear does, because he uses it every single day.
Absolutely.
And this is just like a quick video to showcase what an incredible piece of gear this bus compressor is. So, Zach, take it away, buddy.
So I've been doing mixing for a little while now. And, for years I've used, I'm sure like a lot of other engineers and producers have used the bus compressor on the master chain before mastering, right? So you mix everything, you get everything balanced and sounding right, and then you feed it through the bus compressor. And the idea is you're running it through a VCA compressor, which, it affects the signal a certain way, which is better to like glue the low end on certain things. When you have snare transients, it'll create a little space in the mix, which can be used as a tool in mixing as well. So, just recently doing the 40 Below Summer record, we were working with two different bus compressors they had. There was one by MS Revive Audio, an MSL compressor, and I think that's also based off of the SSL.
And that metal injection, I'm not the one that did that. This is a guy. This is a guy that recorded and mixed the 40 Below record, not me. So
anyways, we had a bus compressor and another SSL style bus compressor on the drum bus, and as well as the entire mix. And it really occurred to me I had gained an interest in getting an SSL specifically as my next piece of gear, because you think about, you have this whole mix that you put together, everything sounds good, and then you're sending all of the entire mix through this digital plugin to try to recreate what an actual VCA compressor does. And once I used, some real equipment, it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, this is what it's supposed to sound like, So I was pretty set on trying to get one of these for a little while. I've had it for about a month now, ran a bunch of mixes through it. And I could say that this is, it's the classic SSL bus compressor, but it is also so much more than that. And, it's really changed the workflow I have going on for things. So in previous reviews we've done, I was talking about how I run outputs, left and right outputs, to print stems through the Neve Shelford channels, right? So basically, if I go line in, it's bypassing the preamp. I got a separate line in input in the back that bypasses the preamp, where I could use EQ and compression only, and process stems, so like drums left and right, and then guitars left and right, So basically, the way I have this set up now is output 7/8 from the back of this interface, the RME, going into 7/8 left and right. Those two outputs, instead of going back into the RME, are now feeding into the Bus Plus. And if I don't want to use the Bus Plus, I can have it bypassed like it is right now. If I want to activate it, I could activate the Bus Plus. So this is, we'll start going, and essentially output from this is going back into the RME. First thing I want to specifically mention is like how they've set up the parameters on here, where it almost like, from a mixing standpoint, changes your perspective on how you want to approach certain things even. So it's a very involved unit. There is a video online by SSL of a guy it's called SSL tutorial or something, but he goes over the specifics and, the circuitry behind things, and I can leave that to him. But what we can talk about today is how I've been using it for some heavy mixes, and just do a couple different examples. There's also a mid-side mode on this thing, which has been particularly a game changer for me. Just the amount of spread and width imaging I can create with this unit while processing stems is really, it's eye-opening every time. I guess we'll run a couple things through it and show you guys the Bus Plus. this is a new example. It's actually a very new song. I haven't even written any leads to this. In fact, I'm not even sure if this is the structure of the song. I just tracked some guitars, all the instruments, bass, drums, keys, orchestrations. And essentially what I've done here is, so in this case, for this session, I've used the Bus Plus for two different steps of the signal chain, I guess. So what I'm really, okay, let me break this down in a way that makes sense. So I'm going to bypass everything on the master. Right now, I have my master in the center over here. And everything to the left of this master, these are all the keys, go into a keys bus. I have the instruments, the actual tracks that were recorded on. So all the kicks, all the drum kit, kick sample, snare top, snare bottom, toms, overhead left, right, go into a drum bus. And then I have the guitars. We quad tracked the rhythm guitars, so 1, 2, 3, 4 rhythm DIs, and then they were mic'd up and reamped with 2 mics on each guitar. So it's a total of 8 tracks left and right for rhythm guitars. And then this is just some extra, some extra leads I was messing around with.
How many C's in thick? I guess in several C's.
I got all the instruments, as I was showing, going to their own buses. I had then fed out the buses and then done prints. So I have, through both Neve channel strips first, and then going into the SSL. And so I have drums printed there. The first guitar, JRV, is printed there. The Stephen Carpenter print is there. The keys were printed there. And for bass, I didn't actually run that through and print, but I have a separate signal chain going on for that completely. So for these prints specifically, when I was running left and right, the first, there's different modes on the SSL Bus Plus, and the mode that I was running for these prints of the stems was specifically mid-side mode. Now, mid-side, if you're not familiar with it already, is essentially, focusing on the middle of the panning field, how you compress and EQ certain things, versus the outside of the panning field. And I guess, if I come over to the SSL, move these, go through the different modes, this one is the mid-side mode. And so the left side here actually controls the mids, while the right side controls the highs. And what this essentially does is, by taming some of the highs from the mids and taming some of the lows on the sides, really, we create like a really nice separation and width. And it's also a form of mastering. So in a way, the whole process I'm doing here is essentially stem mastering, where a part of the master is actually done on these stems. And then as I'm feeding it into the master, ozone in my case, I'm utilizing a lot less of ozone on the digital end and having analog processing for mid-side, and then feeding it into the bus compressor. So, okay, there's the mid-side mode, and I feed the individual stems, which we'll go in and listen to and see what it does. But then I take all of the mid-side printed stems, and I feed all of those into an all instruments bus. So now all of them are going into left and right on the instruments bus. And then, before mastering, once everything's sitting right and dialed in, I'm actually feeding out again and bypassing the Neves this time. Unless I need to cut a little bit of low end or something, I'll use the actual EQ to do it rather than a digital EQ on the whole mix. And then feeding it into this, and then I'm processing it through classic stereo bus compressor mode. So now, when you're in classic stereo bus compressor mode, this side is actually working as a stereo unit.
And it works just like their traditional.
This is the SSL,
yeah.
Yeah, it's an SSL bus compressor, like a G comp. But it has features from the levels of saturation from all the different models of their previous, analog rack mount units. So what I can, in 4K mode, if I hold that, I can dial it up, and basically the more red it becomes, the more saturation it's adding, and they're actually very different colors and characteristics. Typically, I go a little hotter with the 4K mode on when I'm doing the mid-side prints, and I feel like that actually helps add a little bit of character rather than when I'm doing it on the whole mix. I don't want to achieve too much grit on the entire mix and the cymbals, where I can get a little more grit on the guitars, for example, you know. So I like to get a little more in depth with the mid-side prints. But yeah, why don't we run a couple things through and
yeah, let's start with I mean, since it's in stereo LR mode, let's do a master.
The entire mix.
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
entire mix.
Right now, everything on the Neve channel strips is bypassed. There's no lights on. I'm going to bypass. Actually, let me turn up the threshold a little bit. I'm going to bypass the Bus Plus as well. So right now, essentially, if I hit record or play, we're going to hear back being fed out into this, into that, and then being fed back in, and nothing, and that's it. So none of it's going to be on.
So in theory, it should come back sounding exactly
the same.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think there's a slight difference. It just like running through the circuitry, it actually sounds, it even makes it sound better, like arguably, but whatever. We're running it through dry right now without anything. Okay, so a couple things here. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. I don't have to turn it down because I got the mic. So right now, I feel like I got a good balance between all the instruments. We have mid-side going on, so there's a lot of spread on some of these keyboard parts and some of the, on the guitars, and specifically on the keys and guitars, they're really far out. Bass is dead center, and drums are also spread out, and it kind of tames the highs in a really nice way. So it's still, however, in my opinion, missing a little bit of the pump, a little bit of that glue on the low end, and that's essentially where a bus compressor comes in. So if I go here without anything on this, I just want to use the bus compressor. I'm going to turn on this the stereo classic mode on here, and right up
the volume.
Yeah. I got a makeup gain here, which I have cranked a little bit, so I'm going to turn that back down, and I'm going to the mix knob, which is really cool. I'm going to turn that to 100%, so we can hear exactly what we're doing for now. So if I turn it off now, that's without it. And that's with it with a little bit of compression. Honestly, it's...
The needle's moving a little slightly.
Yeah. And it's really on the snare transients where we're seeing it move right now. So let me just turn off 4K mode. Let me turn off low THD. So this is classic stereo G comp, essentially. So if I now turn down the threshold, you'll hear it.
There it is.
Yeah, and if I bring up the makeup gain now, so that's just straight classic bus compressor, right? Now,
what are your attack settings on that?
So I got attack all the way, it's on the second notch, 0.03, I believe,
okay.
Or 0.
Yep,
0.3. And then release is also quick, also on the second notch. But release has a really cool function with the auto here, where it actually runs 2 separate release times simultaneously, and it does this, has a really cool effect to it. So as far as bus compression, when I ran, here, let me pause this for a second. So immediately you can notice how it's bringing out some of the low end on the bass, some of the note of the bass,
yeah.
it just kind of tightens up.
It definitely tames the transient and like the upfrontness of the snare head.
Absolutely, and it just kind of adds that glue. So now,
do you like? By the way, do you like to normally bus compress with a faster attack? Because I see a lot of people. Again, the thing I harp on the most is the term industry standard. A lot of people say if you're using bus compression, slowest attack, fastest release.
Right. So, I mean, typically when you're working with something with such fast transients and double bass and metal, it favors a quicker attack as opposed to, something that's more drawn out and like violins or like, a chorale piece or whatever it is.
Just depends on the genre.
Yeah, or even a slower tempo, for example, rather than something specific like that. Something more chill and a slower tempo could actually benefit from a slower attack time, where it really kind of eases into that compressor. You get that characteristic of it. But right now, there's several things. I mean, in the case of a heavy mix like this, what I'm really aiming for is to glue the low end with the bass and to bring out the snare, like create space in the mix where the snare is hitting. Essentially side chaining, but not in a different way. It has its own characteristic to it, where it kind of just makes everything more lush and sound how it's supposed to. I guess if that's the right way of describing it. And other than just the bus compression, so one thing I was going to say, while I was doing on the 40 Below record, the bus compressor they had on the mix was essentially, it didn't have a mix knob on it, right? So that changes things a little bit in a sense that
you can dictate how much of that effect you want in the final product.
Right. Which is kind of like, it's a big deal. At least as far as like the digital version of bus compressors I've run in the past, there's been a mix knob, and I've used a little more compression than I'd want, and then dial the mix knob back to get the characteristic of that blended in parallel, essentially. In the 40 Below Summer Room, there was no mix knob, and so what happens with there is you end up turning the threshold a little bit lower and not get as much characteristic, but that was also at the same time a very colorful bus compressor, so it had almost like a little bit more of the characteristic. So it was a nice blend. Not saying it was one way or another, just saying that this is a little different because of that mix knob. So it's a very powerful tool, but the mix knob does not only work for compression here. The other really, really cool thing on this thing, on the Bus Plus specifically, is this low frequency, high frequency dynamic EQ. And so the way that works is, on the low frequency, if I tap this, I could choose what frequency I want for the lows. And the high frequency, now I could change, oh no, it's all the way up. So
And the Neil's basically
determining what frequency is
like where on,
the
like
highs.
if you look at a frequency chart, and look at where the Neil's pointing.
They're not exactly the actual frequency. There's a chart that correlates to what the actual frequency is.
The owner's manual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll show a picture of that or whatever. But as far as these two knobs, now what they do is, this is very neat. Basically, if I turn to the right, you'll start to see this light activate, and what it does is it's expanding the low end transients. Whereas if I turn this knob to the left, it's going to compress the low end transients.
So it works as an expander too.
It's to the right is expansion, to the left is compression, and that's the same thing that's going on with the high frequency. And then there's a level for the lows once you have it expanded, and this is a beautiful, when I turn the low up on this, I mean, it's the low end you want on the mix, like it's just, you're not over exerting too much energy from the speaker, and you could actually drive it a little bit and then turn down this mix knob and get like a nice blend with the bus compression. And you could also have this feed into the bus compressor and trigger the sidechain for the bus compressor, which is really cool. So, just with these parameters alone, there's so many
things you could do with this.
Right. And then there's the 4K mode. If I essentially press this knob, it's a different kind of low end from the SSL G EQ, I guess, or G compressor. I'm not sure specifically which one, but it changes the characteristic of it completely. So almost tightens it up a little bit.
This has several SSL tools bundled up right in there.
Yeah.
I mean, no pun intended, it's called SSL, the Bus Plus, but
right.
It's amazing how many tools this one piece of gear is.
Right. I guess, why don't we run some things through it, just to give a brief overview of what's going on here. So now we're in stereo classic mode, and then we'll go over the mid-side bus mode, and then, just basically show you how this thing is like awesome and such a game changer. And really like the benefits of an analog unit versus doing some of these processes digitally, you know, because they're such important parts of the end result of the mix. It's like, you know, if you're trying to replicate something on such an important part of the mix, you're never going to reach a certain level of quality. You know what I mean? So it's really, yes, it's for the audiophiles and stuff, but it's also the way it's been done on so many hit records since the 70s, you know? This is just expansion on the low and high a little bit. If I bring up this low, also, I want to experiment with the 2 different auto release modes here and just show you the different characteristics on that. So,
see, that for me, the low end feels more full in that mode.
Okay, and then this is auto 2. That has even more low end.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice. One thing we don't have activated is this low THD.
Now, what does the low THD do?
So it like tightens up the low end and refines it even more. And then the 4K mode.
It's so subtle of a difference, but you can hear it.
It's like it's waking up the whole mix, you know, and like tightened up that low end so much. Also remember, threshold's running a little hot right now. So what I'm gonna do is turn this mix down on the mix knob here, and I'm gonna bring it back a decent amount. So this is a blend of the original mix that was there with the bus compressor. And the neat thing right now is it's still creating some of that space where the snare is. And I'm getting that color of this SSL, but blended with not a ridiculous amount of compression, you know, like where it's drowning out the whole song. It still sounds natural, basically. So I'm gonna bring up the makeup gain. Yeah, see how the low end is like so fat. It's almost too much. What I could do in this case, remember we're running through these SSLs
yeah, the low end
right
was
now.
a little extreme there, but like we're showing you guys how to use this.
Right. I think we can even turn down the mix a hair more. And the one thing I was gonna say is, remember, we're running through the Neves before we're even going into this. So if there's something I wanna adjust on the entire mix, I can actually utilize this EQ, yeah. So I'm gonna activate those EQs, and right now I got these mid and high band flat, and I got this at 100 with a tighter Q over here, engaged, and then a little just volume knocked off those low mids, more on the low side, but to kind of tighten it up even more. There's that extra little bit of, you know, EQ feeding into this. So as we're boosting this, the one thing that this is really good for is it's giving you the lows that you really want in the mix on your master, essentially. So I'm gonna try to get more lows out of this than, you know, and rely on the compression to kind of feed into this to create the end result sound. So now let's hear it back. It should be a little bit tightened up on the low end. See, but it's still got all that.
Yeah, it's definitely tighter a little.
Yeah.
That sounds sick.
Yeah, it's heavy and like clean, and you hear everything so clearly.
Analog, bro, you can't beat analog.
If you want to experiment with the different levels of 4K, I could increase the saturation on there just to hear how it goes up.
Yeah, move over here though so I can hear the speaker.
It was yellow. The more red it gets, the more saturation. Really hear it in the cymbals.
I heard it.
That just sounds really nice.
That sounds really, really nice.
Yeah. So we can keep it on orange now. We got a little bit of expansion, a little bit of boost on the lows, and a little bit on the highs. We got the mix knob a little less than 50%. We're on auto 2 for release. The attack is still at 0.3. And ratio is at 4.
So let's turn it off for an A and B.
Right, so
This isn't on.
this is on now. If I bypass this, I mean, it sounds like the life is gone, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the fact that the
Other than
volume's
makeup
louder.
gain, of
Yeah,
course.
let me actually turn it back to the same, around the same volume with makeup gain. So let me. That's
Right
about,
around there.
yeah. If I.
Oh yeah, you hear the difference with
Yeah, yeah.
with the kick hits.
Well, the kick
Instantly.
hits, the cymbals, the glue
Oh,
on
it
the
sounds
low
so
end.
much more full,
Yeah, yeah. And then it's nice to get a little bit of juice from makeup gain.
One more A and B. So it's with it on and
Yeah.
then off.
Yeah, it just
on
sounds
again.
stale without
Yeah.
it, you know? And these are all like very.
I mean, it
Yeah.
still sounds good without it, but this just elevates
it
it,
just-
to just like that next level.
Yeah, it really does. And it's different from the way the digital bus compressor would do
Yeah.
it, completely. But in a really cool way. What's really important is how much more together, but still separate everything sounds, if that makes sense.
It just sounds like more full mix.
It's creating that space where the snare is, and just allowing the reverbs to like translate really nicely. So right now we just essentially quickly dialed in this classic stereo mode on the bus compressor on the entire mix.
Awesome.
So just works for so many different applications.
Game changer piece of gear.
Yeah, and the thing is, we're running really light compression. I wouldn't say really light. We dialed down the mix knob a little bit, but for metal specifically, it's typically a lot less compression than when you have something like anything else. I mean, really, anything slower tempo like hip hop or R&B, where you can really kind of lay into the compressor a little bit and start getting some really cool, qualities out of this thing. So what we're gonna do, why don't we switch over to mid-side mode?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna show you the difference on. Let's start with drums. So also. Okay, yeah. I was gonna say while we're here, and we have somewhat of a print going on. Actually, no, that's fine. Why don't we go? Let's do mid-side mode. Sorry. If I go to my drums print, I'm gonna just create a new playlist to show what's going on. Damn. Let's get a drum bus sent over. So right now, drum bus is, I've got all the drums feeding into it. It's going to
Including
output.
cymbals.
Yep, overheads, room mic.
Any samples going to that too right now?
No kick sample. That's it. But snare top and bottom is just snare
But the
bus.
kick sample is just blended in to just get the sound of the kick.
Actually, it's fully just a sample in this case. And the reason why I'm saying, people are like, click drum, samples,
purists out
whatever. Yeah, the purists out there. Here's a big thing. Ready to have your minds blown? The the kick sample, well, the song's at 160 beats per minute. There's some 16th note sections going on where it's almost necessary to have that right amount of click and the even consistency. However, in order to humanize this kick, when we take all the stems and feed it through the bus compression, that pump that it's getting, depending on the settings we're setting in, almost brings back some of that life in a way and almost humanizes this sample. So it works really well in the case of metal over X amount of BPMs. I would say usually 155 to 160 when you're in a heavy mix with 8-string guitars especially. But also just in like heavy metal distorted guitars.
I've always found that if you're working with just samples and that's the only source you have, put some analog saturation on it and just mess with it and purposely make it, for lack of a better term, less clean sounding, and it'll just sound like it has way more life to it.
Yeah,
but that's my personal experience. Some people really like just the super cleanliness of the sample, but to me, it doesn't sound like it has life to it. But if you combine a little bit of analog saturation with the samples, you can make those work.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm also like very sparing with the sample. Also, like, you know, I want to have complete control over it, and so there's a specific reason I'm not doing it on this part of the signal chain, because we're gonna feed it through. We're gonna print drums right now. This is drums without anything. Actually, I still got stereo classic mode on, so let me turn this off. We're not doing that anymore. No EQ. This is exactly...
Now, everything's bypassed, so this is everything that's going on right now in Pro Tools.
Right.
None of this is on right now.
Yeah, we're just getting left and right. We can even see that the left channel's a little bit louder. So first things first, let's balance those out, make sure we got the same on both. So I'm gonna just turn up the line level a little bit on the right Neve. You could see on drums print, they're a little more even now. Yeah, they're just about the same.
That's pretty much there.
Yeah. So okay, so basically before I would process my drums with these SSL channel strips anyways. But right now we're bypassing the preamp. I'm going to engage the high pass filter, but basically just cleaning up some of the low end. Just basically 2 notches. Oh, there's the offset China. Let me mute that real quick. That sounded crazy. All right. Anyways.
So what frequency are you high passing?
Oh, that's like 30. It's 25. It's like so low. Yeah. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna switch this EQ on. Let's flatten these out so nothing's on. Switch on the inductor EQs. Those are flat, and it sounds better, right?
It's running through the circuitry.
Yeah.
Wait, turn it off.
It just adds something to it.
It's tiny. It's
yeah.
Tiny.
It just sounds better. Anyways.
To the circuitry, man.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up some of the lows here, 60. Sorry, that's at 100. Let's switch that to 60. It also adds a little bit of fluff in that kick sample. This is a big part of it.
It's definitely more, gut punching.
Yeah. I'm going to switch these to 3.5 to bring up a little bit of the snap on snare. Yeah, there we go. A little bit of that snare ringing characteristic. I'm actually going to turn these up to 16 and boost that a little bit. A little more cymbal definition.
The clickiness is coming a little bit more.
Yeah.
Crispiness in the sim.
Now over here, I got these 2 diode bridge compressors. And right now the meter is showing output. However, if I turn these on...
Oh my god.
Yeah, and I got the gain up here, but if I turn this on, we could see how much compression it's actually doing, which is not much at all.
Barely.
So let me actually get a little more compression. And similar to the SSL Bus Plus, these also have a blend knob on them, which I don't have turned up all the way. I also like fast mode on here at the medium fast, just a little bit faster. Brings out a little bit of that reverb on the snare, and then a little bit of silk saturation to get those cymbals to really get a little crisp in there. So now this is a very quick overview of how I would just use this for the drums itself, right? But now there's mid-side mode. We're running a little hot here now with the snare. Cool. So I'm going to switch this to mid-side mode with the mode selector here. This is a dual mono mode. We want to treat left and right separate. And then this is mid-side mode. So remember, like I was saying before.
Hold on, let me just stop it so you can...
Yeah, sorry. Like I was saying before, in mid-side mode specifically, now both sides are going to turn on, and this side controls specifically the mids, and this side controls specifically the highs, right? And the sides. I keep mixing up mids and highs and mids and sides. Mids, sides, okay? So what I'm going to try to do here...
You're not half wrong, because all the highs are usually the ones that are most panned, so...
Right.
You're not, like,
you want the bass in the middle, and
yeah.
you want the highs on the outside. This is essentially just doing that on a greater level to achieve more separation between the instruments, and it's a beautiful thing. So drums already sound nice, right?
Yeah.
Now, in order for me to solo the mids or the sides, I could just hold this side, and now this side is solo.
That's basically a glorified solo button, right?
Right. If I just hold the bypass button on that side. So I'm going to, again, just change this dynamic EQ. I could turn down the threshold a little bit. Let me also turn that mix knob back up to 100 right there, and put these EQs at 0. And now when I feed drums through, we're running the same, so we're running through all of this and then into this now. So if I start it again, okay, so right now it's just getting a little bit of compression, which honestly I'm already doing a little bit of compression here, so I don't want too much on the mids, but a little light amount doesn't hurt. So I want to just lower that threshold a little bit. What I really do want to do, remember this is the mids, I want some of that cymbal high end and click on the kick to kind of die out. So now I'm going to turn this high frequency knob to the left to compress the highs. If I go extreme with it, you can really see how it takes out the highs out of the middle. We don't want to necessarily do that much.
But bring it back to 0 real quick. So there's the clickiness of the sample.
Yep.
It sounds like a fake sample, but if you turn it just slightly where it was at like even 10 o'clock or 9.
Yeah. It tames the high-end crack on the snare drum too, on the cymbals, everything really. But remember, this is just the middle. So now, let me solo just the sides, and let me even out these dynamic EQs. So we got sides, not getting any compression on there, but we could...
So it's just soloing the effects that's going on right now, right?
Right, no, this is just the sides.
Just the sides,
So just this side now. So what I'm gonna do, I expanded the highs a little bit, and I want to cut the low end. So I'm gonna compress the low end on the sides. And also important to notice, the makeup on this side controls the makeup gain on the sides. The makeup on this side controls the makeup gain on the mids. So if I want a little more highs, I could turn that up. If I want a little more of the lows, well, we have the sides soloed, but let me put both in. And now if you listen from the middle, the amount of width that has... Stand in the middle for a second. I'm gonna bypass what we just did here real quick. And you listen to the width on the drum kit sound.
All right.
Okay, this part. No, this is a good big open part coming up. 1, 2, without, 3, 4. Without any mid-side processing or compression from the Bus Plus.
This is it as it is.
Yeah.
Now let's turn it on.
So listen for the width.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like if you had like 4 room mics and you added the room mics into the mix.
Dude,
it sounds more.
It sounds like you're sitting behind the drum kit.
Yeah.
Is what it really sounds like.
So it sounds like you just have like epic, like a couple of epic stereo room mics in there that just somehow magically found its way in.
Right.
It sounds like you're in a completely different space.
So It's really crazy. The combination of this, even this channel strips running into this, I could essentially run the entire mix analog without any digital processing. However, I do like to use a couple tools like gates and some reverb plugins. You know, I'm feeding reverbs into this, and then the way I'm dialing in the compression actually brings it out more. Once I do some of these EQs, I end up having to turn down how loud my overheads are, and reducing the amount of kick bleed that's coming into the overheads. I can also control the level of the highs on the sides, but this is really to kind of like put the drum kit in the right place in the mix, right? So
it's a completely different sounding drum kit.
absolutely, and what it does is, I think what I was saying as far as blending the snare sample after the fact, blending the snare sample with the spread out drums like that, once it's fed through the bus compressor, then it blends in, like it fits into the mix so much better, rather than utilizing it as a tool to squash out the mix and create space around where the snare is hitting.
Amazing.
So that's like very, very fine, you know, specifics there. But yeah, that was basically on the drum kit, you know, like what it does. Another thing is, you know, on guitars, it's very nice because typically, you know, I'm reamping and then picking up the signal. These mics got moved. They're not supposed to be like that.
That's probably my bad.
That's all good. Just don't want it up on the grill. There you go. So I end up miking with, you know, running 2 mics out of the cab. When I'm tracking the cab, I'm tracking into the preamp section of the Neve Shelfords, right? And so naturally when you mic up a cab, you get a lot of kind of extra low end and woof, you know, like
especially on the do.
right, on the chugs, especially with an 8-string, you know, so even more so with an 8-string. So a big part.
A lot of what people do with that situation is have a multiband compressor. If you're digital,
right,
you run a multiband compressor like the Waves. I think it's the C comp.
The C4, right?
C4. Fat Filter has a amazing multiband compressor, but essentially that's how you control the low end. But what I think Zacky's going to show us right here is using the SSL to do the same thing.
Exactly. Almost the same thing, but what I found is, you know, using the multiband compressor, while the whole purpose of using the multiband compressor is to compress some of the low ends and not just EQ out all that information, to have some of that air moving characteristic to the guitars, it still takes away a little more than you'd want. And I've noticed on certain records where I've actually removed the multiband compressor. We're talking about 6-string guitars, not 8 strings. It's different with 8 strings. With normal 6-string guitars, I removed the multiband compressor and I messed with, you know, notch EQing out certain low frequencies and was actually able to get a really nice, like gritty, aggressive, present guitar tone that the band really loved, essentially. More so than the multiband compressor. It just thinned it out a little too much. So now, same thing like we did with the drums. I mean, I have the independent EQ control before, but I don't want to EQ out all the low end. Also, just using a real EQ is very favorable to an digital EQ. But on the mid-side mode, on this Bus Plus specifically, now I can tame the lows. I can add as much compression as I want. I also have a separate level for the mids versus the highs. And so I can get that guitar to still be aggressive, but just deliver exactly how much low end you need without sacrificing any of that quality. And it's just awesome. Yeah, like the way the guitar tones.
He's been so scientific with the review talk about this. Yeah. In the end, he just says, "That's awesome." It is, dude. Like, what an amazing piece of gear this is.
Yeah, it's an extremely powerful tool in the studio. You know, mixing tool, and it really kind of just sets the bounds as far as like the amount of low end it feeds back in certain things, and just gives you ultimate control over the whole mix. Essentially, the mid-side mode, mid-side is a part of, you know, mastering. It doesn't have to be a part of mastering, but most often it's used as a mastering tool. And so what we're doing here, by doing mid-side on the drum print, on the guitars, keys, really spread it out, bring out some of the high 7K on this EQ, and then spread it out. We're essentially taking away some of the work from the mastering software we'd be using after the fact. So we mid-side the individual stems, drums, guitars, keys. Bass just runs mono as a true mono signal. So I don't want to split it and send it into 2 separate channels. Then we feed all of those stems into the bus compressor, all instruments bus, to glue the low end a little bit together. I've essentially done 80% of the work that my mastering chain would do at that point.
With just these two
with analog gear. And so, right. And so when I do put on ozone for mastering, I'm so much lighter with it than I was before.
Such a lighter workload
and the amount of clarity and like headroom it's brought out is just unbelievable. It's a game changer. It's you know, so that's essentially the rundown and use of the SSL Bus Plus in this setting, in this scenario.
All right.
Yeah.
So by now, if you're watching this by now, you're like, okay, you sold me. How much?
Right. Again, this is not an advertisement. I'm floored with this gear.
Zachy bought this with his own money, so full disclosure.
Yes.
But the link for it for Sweetwater, it's in the description if you want to get it yourself.
Right. Again, this is not a review where I'm going over all the technical bits. I just ran it through a metal mix, really heavy, kind of showing some of the characteristics and benefits of using this in this setting. But it works really well and across all genres. It's not so much meant for a genre or not meant for a certain genre. It's just how you're able to process the signal.
Yeah.
Which is what it's really, for.
Awesome.
So.
Really awesome, Zachy. And you can definitely hear the difference. So check it out. Zachy is a producer, engineer, musician extraordinaire. His link and social is in the description, as always. He is one of my like-minded creators partners, along with Greg Talfeyon. So
absolutely.
If you are looking for some pretty top-tier recording, mixing, mastering, engineering, producing, whatever, hit Zachy up. He's your dude. So, Zach, thanks a lot, man, for showing us
of course.
one of your toys in this rack here.
Absolutely.
Really
yeah.